Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Horses Advocate podcast. This is Doc T, and I am celebrating this month, May of 2023, with my 50th year with horses. And for that, I've been reading my autobiography called Since the Days of the Romans. So I'll be putting that in between some of my other podcasts I don't want to get to you, because I'm also celebrating this month my 40th year floating horses, my 39th year being a veterinarian from Cornell Vet School, where my mentor at the end of my third veterinary year said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And we walked into a horse stall, and he showed me how he could put his hand inside a horse's mouth and feel every tooth that's in there and feel the soft tissues and identify problems that were going on in the horse. And I was absolutely blown away. I mean, it was just amazing that, number one, I could do that with my hand in there, and number two, that I could feel so much. And I guess I was just amazed that the horse let me without any medications. And that's where I learned it, at Cornell in 1983, from my mentor, who taught me that there's more to being a veterinarian than just being a veterinarian, that there are some horsemanship skills that had to go along with it. And seeing that I've been out with the horses for 5 years after leaving school, and deciding to go back to undergrad and going on to vet school, as you learned from my Since the Days of the Romans autobiography. You know that I picked up a lot of really good skills as a horseman. But today I want to focus on dentistry. Dentistry is what I think the most underrated improvement you can do on a horse next to diet. And that is not obvious to the horse owner. So what I mean by that is, yes, you can look at the body condition score, you can look at the top line score, and you can say, okay, I've got to get the nutrition in order. You can look at the hooves and see that the hooves are falling apart. And again, look at the nutrition, which nobody seems to connect nutrition with hooves. But that's one of the core tenets of nutrition, is feed the hoof to get a good hoof. But at least you can see that it needs attention, and say, I need a farrier out here to at least remove the excess. We can look at the hair coat and say, okay, we need to do something with this. We need to shave it off. It's got Cushing's, and it can't figure out that we've got increasing daylight and the temperatures are getting warm, yet he's not shedding, so we know how to trim. We can do these things. He's got a cut, he's got a skin disease. We can attack all those things because they're present. We start talking about the gut microbiome, and that's getting into woo-woo land. We're just sitting there thinking, there's bacteria inside our gut, and they're the ones that we're feeding, and they in turn are feeding us. That can be a really hard concept for a lot of people to understand. But when it comes to dentistry, there's a lot of anthropomorphological things that are going on. In other words, we associate human teeth with horse teeth, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So let's start with that. Horse teeth are unique in that they continually erupt throughout life. And that's just something that's hard for people to understand. So they put in the word grow. And grow is like your fingernails or your hair, where if the hair comes out or fingernail falls off, it'll be replaced with a new one. That's called growth. That's fine. But the horse makes its whole tooth. And yes, there probably is some changes going on within the tooth as it erupts out. But overall, that tooth erupts, which, if you want to get a good visual for that, think of a mechanical pencil. As you're writing, you click out more lead to continue writing. Otherwise, you run out of lead. Well, the same with the tooth. These horses are chewing constantly. And in that pattern of chewing, they wear down most of the tooth, but not all of it. Just the outer edges of the upper teeth and the inner edges of the lower teeth, as a rule, don't get worn down, so there's a nice edge that's there. There are other places where they also get no wearing down, so you start to get some prominent points. But what a lot of people don't understand is, while they can get it, they can say, okay, the horse is chewing, and so they're getting this edge. The one final step in that is a word called stropping. So that's the word stop, S-T-O-P, with an R, strop. And a long time ago, when men shaved their whiskers with a straight blade, they would, after cleaning the blade up, they would strop the blade, which is the action of moving the blade back and forth on a leather strap with a little bit of oil added to it. And that would hone the edge to what is called a razor's edge. Well, the tongue acts as a strop, and that's the verb, or the noun, pardon me, that is the object. And the saliva is a lubricant, and the tongue moving back and forth is a stropping action that sharpens these teeth into a razor's edge. And the way I know this is because there's several horses that, for whatever reason, are on liquid diets. Either they've lost their some of their teeth, or they have an esophageal diverticulum. I've seen that. Or they have an oral fistula that's getting food from the oral cavity up into the nose, and a liquid diet bypasses that, because a horse is essentially eating by sucking things down like a straw. And these horses can go easily a year, sometimes 2 years, before they start to get a sharp edge. The other evidence is that a horse that's in their 30s, oftentimes their teeth have stopped erupting, and so they're not getting this edge anymore, so it's not being stropped into a sharp edge, with the exception of the first lower cheek teeth, which is what I affectionately call old horse tooth, where the materials that are using that form that tooth have been replaced by the end stage portion of the tooth, or what you might want to call the root system, as it's erupted up down into the root system. And you have different materials other than enamel that are softer, and the soft edges just get worn out by the tongue moving, and the remaining hard edges become like daggers with convex edges, recessed edges that are razor sharp that the horse feels. And oftentimes in a horse that's 30 or older, it's the first bottom cheek teeth that I have to file down smooth, but the rest of the mouth is okay. So stropping is a word that we all should understand. We should understand that if the horse is chewing, their teeth need doing. You can write that one down. And I have many people, in fact, I just had a request just last night. Doc, can you come out and check this one horse, and if his teeth need doing, go ahead and do it. But if they don't need doing, don't do it. And this is a huge concept. I want to go over it. You could ask the question, does my horse need dentistry? Only the horse knows. I don't know. I certainly don't know. I can just give you statistics and averages. My expression that I give people is, we want the horse to be in maintenance mode, not in corrective mode. It's just like, and this may not be a great example, but you change your oil before the engine seizes. So you don't want to be waiting until there's a problem before you call someone to take a look at the horse's teeth. So that's called maintenance. And when does a horse move from maintenance into correction? And my rule of thumb is somewhere between 6 and 12 months for most horses. This is why most horses that are in training, where you're spending time and you're spending money, you want to get the teeth done on a biannual basis every 6 months. Because there's a lot of horses that somewhere between 6 and 12 months, they're going along just fine. And then insidiously, which is a big word for some of us, I love the word because it means that we're going to move slowly, almost imperceptibly, from one position to another, from being maintenance to correction. And then when it does become evident to the rider, where they're trying to ask the horse to do something on the bit and the horse is objecting, people just finally come to the conclusion that, wow, the teeth might be sharp and we need to float the teeth. And all along, the teeth have been sharp for months before the horses sees a dentist. And that's really tough, because horses deserve a little bit better than that. It's the best thing I can say to you. I mean, in other words, you can't be waiting until the horse screams at you, hey, I got a problem here. We have to be good horsemen, advocates for horses, and move ahead of that curve. The problem is it costs money to get the horse's teeth floated, or in your area, you might not have somebody that you trust or is effective in getting all the points. And you find that floating teeth is a waste of your time, a waste of money. So you just keep going until the horse is just giving you all sorts of bit problems. And what do? Well, it's out of your vision. You can't see it, but the horse can be telling you in so many ways, and it can be really subtle. It's like starting to collect a little bit of sand in your shoe. 1 or 2 grains of sand doesn't bother you, but as you collect more and more sand, then it starts to become a problem. Or if you don't brush your teeth and use dental floss for a while, you start to accumulate some food between your teeth, and after a while you start to say, hey, this kind of hurts, I better do something about cleaning my teeth. It's the same idea. There is a threshold, we call it, I call it a threshold of pain, that the horse finally achieves, where before that the horse could tolerate what was going on, and after that the horse can't tolerate it and will start to show you something that's going on. So what is that something? Well, it's almost imperceptible. I'll give you a great example, and this has something to do with the temporomandibular joint, which Dr. Carmalt out of Saskatchewan Vet School did some studies on how the horse's jaw moves. And he was able to put on a, what do I want to call it? A fabric, yeah, like a mask, but a whole hood on the horse's head. And on that hood were computer sensors that the computer could read to determine which way the jaw was moving and how it moved during a course of normal eating. And he ended up injecting one of the temporomandibular joints to cause it to be temporarily painful. And when he did, the computer noticed that the horse was chewing in one direction before the pain, and it rotated in the completely opposite direction after the pain was established. But the human eye couldn't see it. In other words, you're looking at the horse and the horse just looked like he was chewing, but the horse was experiencing pain and changed the way he moved. Now, I've been saying this since the beginning of time, that when the horse feels pain, he's going to try to avoid the pain in the mouth. And I sometimes joke, and hopefully you can understand me, but it has a tongue hurt, I don't hold my tongue. So if the tongue hurts, I don't want to move my tongue. Just think about it. If you've ever had a canker or you bit your tongue and you don't want to move it, you alter everything that's going on in the mouth. If you have a toothache, you alter everything. If you have a focus of attention in the mouth, like a stuck piece of food between your teeth, or if you've broken a tooth and you have the sharp edge, it becomes a focus of attention, and everything changes at every meal that you chew. Well, the same I find goes on in the horse. So if there's something going on that's bothering the horse is going to alter the way they move their tongue and move their jaw. And from that, over time, you will start to see different wear patterns on the incisors. Now, this is a pretty interesting concept because there's a whole group of equine dentists, both vets and non-vets, who believe that you have to adjust the incisors to make sure that the temporomandibular joints don't get stressed and the rest of the mouth stays, what they say, balanced. And I disagree. What I feel is that when you look at the incisors and they look uneven, so they call it a frown or a smile. So instead of the chewing surface being straight across, they have a curvature, or they have a diagonal aspect, or in the case of my very own horse, it was a V shape. When that occurs, it, in my mind, is secondary to the movement of the tongue over time. So I'll let you know that back in 2002, I flew over to Glasgow, Scotland, where the British Equine Veterinary Association was having their meeting. And because I was one of the few Americans there were 6 of us there, the proprietor of the organizer, that's the word, organizer of the meeting, decided to get me in front of a veterinarian who's the head of the Edinburgh Vet School and probably one of the most evident, prolific publishers of information on teeth in horses. His name is Dr. Patty Dixon. That's Paddy, not Patty as in female, Patty Padrice Dixon. And he and I sat down and had a box lunch together, one-on-one at a small round table, because this person thought it would be a good idea that we both got together, her knowing that I came all the way over there just to see what they were talking about in dentistry. That was 2002. So we're talking about 21 years ago. And he asked me point blank, looked straight at me. He says, what do you think about incisor reductions? That's the fancy technical term for filing the front teeth so they become balanced, so they go straight across, which a lot of vets were doing. And in fact, there were several stories of horses who actually lost their lives from this because they would file them straight across, which would cause excruciating pain because they got into the pulp chamber and got the teeth infected, and the horses stopped chewing, and it's just a disaster. I mean, there weren't a lot of them, but there were enough that most of us who were doing teeth knew about them. So when he asked me that question, I told him I thought that it was unethical. That's the word I think I used, meaning that there's no basis in dentistry, in veterinary care, in just regular routine horse care, where we need to be filing down the incisors because it looks better. I told him that my belief was the reason for the front teeth being abnormally worn was because the horse had a problem further back that was affecting the movement of the jaw and the tongue. Now, this is 2001, all right? And he just stared at me. It was just, there's this whole pause. And that's when he said, well, we've done some electron microscopy of the incisors, which is basically looking at tissue underneath a microscope where they don't use light, but they use electrons, so they can see things that are very small. And they're able to determine what they call prisms. And prisms are basically the makeup of the enamel, because it's not cells, it's prisms, because it's minerals. And they found out that there are two types, what they call type 1 and type 2. And they found that the one of them was softer and was more predominant in the incisors, and the harder enamel was more predominant in the cheek teeth. And he said to me that that's what their findings were, and they were rapidly moving away from incisor reductions there in the United Kingdom. I'll never forget his words, rapidly moving away in the United Kingdom. And to me, I said, good, because there's no basis in science for it. And then I went back to the American Association of Equine Practitioners meeting December that same year that was held in Orlando. And it's just really weird because it's just, I don't know why I remember this, but both of them were just like it was yesterday. And they had a wet lab in Ocala. So we all hopped on a bus in Orlando and drove over to Ocala, an hour or so away. And they set up all the horses, and they had cadaver heads, and they had sedated horses where I got my hands on some power tools to determine if that was something I wanted to do and go down that path. And all the horses were drugged to oblivion, hanging their head from the ceiling with the mouths jacked open. And you know where my beliefs are on that. But what was interesting was Dr. Lauder from the University of Georgia was at one of the stations going over the anatomy of the skull, especially of the mouth, and these cadaver heads. And somebody asked him, what about incisor reductions? And I'll never forget his answer because it was identical to what I just heard. He says, we're rapidly moving away from incisor reductions here in America. And I just took a double take. I even have a picture of Dr. Lauder at the cadaver station still in my files. If he ever wants to have a picture of that, he's gowned up in the paper gowns and has his gloves on and stuff. It's just, Just both of those happened in 2001, 21 years, 22 years ago, 22. And I think, well, I haven't changed my point of view on this. And I think more and more veterinarians are getting away from filing the front teeth because they all realized that it was the back teeth that had harder enamel that was creating sharp points that was causing the tongue to start to move differently through the mouth. And the horse would get a pattern that would create the frown or the smile or the slant or the V. And horses that are maintained without pain in their mouth, I find that their incisors do a pretty good job. Further, if you ever go to the Horse's Advocate, which I really suggest you do, and go into the tab called Topics, it's in the high menu, the top bar, menu bar, Topics, go down to Care, and click on that, you're going to see a project that I did called Aging the Horse by Their Teeth, where I took pictures of horses from 3 years old, documented, to 30 plus years old. All of these horses documented with papers or lip tattoo. And I took the front view, straight on view, as well as both sides, and then the what they call the occlusal surface of the lower jaw. But I want you to look at all the pictures of the straight on view, and you're going to see most of the horses have what I call a relaxed space. And I'll bet you that as you're listening to me right now, if you suddenly just consciously thought about where your teeth are, you're going to find that you haven't clenched them unless you've had too much coffee. You might be grinding them. But most of us relax our jaw. We don't press them together. So this whole idea that the incisors have to be filed so we have good balance in the mouth just doesn't make sense, because the horse is just, most of the time relaxed. At least half the time of the day, they're relaxed. And the tongue is moving in and out just because they're, licking their lips. But they don't clench their teeth and keep their incisors together. So I just think the whole idea of filing the front teeth is wrong. I've thought that forever, and there's been no evidence anywhere, no scientific evidence or even empirical evidence that people have said, yes, you have to do this and it makes all the difference in the world. Those who do say that, I would love for them to do a good study where they don't do anything else. They don't file the cheek teeth at all. They just do the incisors and say, okay, do we have a positive effect? Is the horse better on the bit? Is the horse chewing better? When they wear this hood with the computer things, if they just do the incisors, are they seeing a change in rotation or movement of the tongue? And nobody's done that. I don't think anybody will ever do that. All right, so this whole thing on dentistry is kind of gone helter-skelter. I'm trying to keep focused on some frequently asked questions that are a blog on the Horse's Advocate. If you go to the topics down to the care section, go past aging and go over to dentistry and horses, you're going to see the very first blog that I pinned to the top is the frequently asked questions. And there's 8 questions that I put up above. And then I go down to more specific questions. So these are basically general questions. The first one, does my horse need dentistry? Which is exactly what the person was asking me to determine. And I can't answer that. I can't say that this horse needs it or not, because I've literally seen horses that have shredded the insides of their cheeks. It's got hamburger meat. The teeth are razor sharp. And I turn to the owner and I say, so how's the horse going on the bit? Oh, he's fine. He's doing great. Or I don't use a bit on him. He seems to be doing well. Or, oh, she's just a broodmare. I've got her outside and she seems to be eating just fine. Does that horse need dentistry? I mean, that falls into the question that people have asked me a million times. What do wild horses do? To which my answer is, show me a wild horse. All the horses I know of, at least the Mustangs here in America, are basically feral horses, which means they were bred by humans for thousands of years, and then they escaped, and now they're back out on the range, but they were bred by humans, whatever. I talked to my friend who is a dentist in Singapore, who floats teeth in the Chinese Mongolian horses, and he floats teeth in the thoroughbreds of Japan. And he says, I can't tell the difference. And the Mongolian horses have not been affected by human breeding ever. So he says, no, that's just the way the teeth are. And I'll have to take his word for it because I don't think anybody's doing any research on this. So does my horse need dentistry? It is completely up to the horse. It's their threshold of pain. I have seen horses that I float meticulously, and the owner, the trainer says, oh, the horse is like butter in my hands. Everything's fine. And then they contact me after 4 months and say, you need to get out here because the horse is almost unrideable because it's got one little point and it's going into its cheek. And I'll float it, and I'm just like amazed because the horse the next day is going so much better, and the trainer acknowledges it. They say, no, the horse is doing great now. Thank you so much. And that's a 3-time-a-year horse. Every 4 months, we go in there and make sure that the all points are gone. That's one of the questions people ask. What happens if I don't float my horse? Or what happens if I do float my horse? And I always make a joke out of this. I say, well, there's one good reason why you shouldn't float your horse's teeth. And of course, that perks up everybody's attention. And I say, well, the number one reason is now the horse knows what normal is. So when something abnormal comes, they object and they say, hey, call that guy. So imagine you're walking around with pebbles in your shoes and you're used to it because that's all you know. And then I come along, take your shoe off, and throw out all the pebbles and put it back on. The first thing you're going to do is walk funny because you're anticipating pain. And the second thing is you start to get grains of sand in there and you're just like, hey, take the shoe off and get these little grains of sand out because now you're more sensitized to what normal is and you got to move toward that. So that's one of the important lessons. Does my horse need dentistry? Yeah, some horses, their threshold of pain is so low, they're so sensitive that anything that occurs in the mouth, we got to get out there and take care of it. So my rule of thumb is in equine dentistry, I don't worry about balancing the mouth because that's just ridiculous. And I'll tell you why in a second. But my goal is to remove all sources of pain inside the horse's mouth. And that source of pain is different for every horse. I can take the teeth from one horse and put it in just imagine it's a thought game. I put them in another horse and I'll have a completely different reaction. Maybe something that makes more sense to you is if I took a pebble and put it in your shoe and then took an identical pebble and put it in the same spot that in somebody else's shoe, same shoes, different people, same pebble. I say, go trot down to the other end of the barn. One of you is going to trot and say, this is fine. The other one's going to say, I can't move. It hurts too much. That's what we call threshold of pain. And we have to understand that every horse has a different threshold of pain. It's just that simple. So I can go in the mouth and say, oh, these teeth are horrible. And the horse is like, yeah, so I'm fine. And I can go to another horse and say, gosh, 99% of this horse's mouth is just perfect. It's smooth. Everything's fine. I can feel one little point. And the horse is saying, or the trainer saying, well, you better get that point because he's almost unrideable. It's just that extreme. I'll give you a great example. There's a horse that came from the state of Washington that had been floated 2 weeks earlier and had been floated by a veterinarian using a mouth speculum and power tools and sedation. And she had done a very good job on almost the whole mouth. But what was missed was the outside or the cheek side of the very last upper left cheek tooth. And usually if it's been more than 2 weeks, certainly more than 30 days, I never judge another person's work because the horse chews 25,000 chews per day. And in a month's time has chewed enough to start creating points. So I don't care who you are. If you floated the horse, it's going to be different in 30 days. And that's just the nature of the beast, especially if their enamel is soft and they're chewing a lot, they're going to have 30, 40,000 chews per day. In a 5-year-old, they're going to get very sharp in 30 to 60 days. So you just don't judge another person's work. But this was just barely 2 weeks. And the trainer was down here in Florida saying, I can't get this horse to go right. I know there's something going on in the mouth. So there are actually 3 spots. There's that one spot in the very last upper left cheek tooth, and both first lower cheek teeth had really razor sharp points on the very front where the bit was coming back and hitting this horse. It took me probably 5 minutes to float this horse. That's it, just 5 minutes filing those 3 spots down. And the horse went from pretty much unrideable to winning the grand prize that weekend down here in Palm Beach, which is like, tens of thousands of dollars, probably 50 grand. And that's what caused her to campaign to get me to go to the state of Washington and start floating teeth. And all of you guys out in the state of Washington, a big shout out to all of you. I love you all. I miss you all. I'm not coming back. It's just not enough time in the day for me to do that. But the state of Washington doesn't allow non-veterinarians to float teeth, and all the veterinarians insist on filing teeth the same way, and not using this traditional way that I use. So, that's one of the problems here in America and probably worldwide. You don't need fancy drugs. In most of the horses, you don't need to jack their mouth open with something made out of metal. You just have to understand how to use different techniques to get in and get all these points. And if you get all the points, the horse is going to be happy. If you miss one point, the horse won't be happy, and you've really done nothing to help this horse chew better. So does my horse need dentistry? The horse knows, you don't. You have to play the statistics and say, okay, it's been 6 months. I don't feel like I'm having a problem. Do I wait to 8 months, 7 months, 10 months? And that can be logistically difficult when you find a good equine dentist, vet or not vet, because if they're a veterinarian and they're doing everything in their practice, you might be in the middle of breeding season or show season, and the veterinarian just can't get out there. They don't have enough time. Or they send you somebody who's fresh out of vet school, no offense to them, but they're all trying to, they're basically dumped on, well, go out and do the teeth. And this veterinarian may want to be doing lamenesses, and they're stuck doing teeth. And so maybe it's not a perfect job, or they haven't been given the great training that they should have to understand the purpose of dentistry. So does your horse need dentistry? Only your horse knows. The next subject was why dentistry is an important part of a veterinary practice. Because it is. I don't know what else to say. I mean, veterinarians are supposed to be fixing illnesses and issues that have occurred to the horse. They get cut, you got to sew them up. They've got colic, you got to take care of it. I get it. But we also thrown ourselves into prevention mode through deworming and through vaccinations. Most veterinarians have avoided prevention in the hoof. And they've found a whole group of people called farriers who will take care of that. And they've taken that burden off the veterinarian. And that's just been tradition for a long time, and that's never going to change. Some veterinarians have become very good as podiatrists, they call themselves. And that's great. But I'm still suffering as I listen to their meetings, and I attend through Zoom. And I find it fascinating that they never talk about nutrition of the hoof. So a big shout out to anybody out there who is talking about it. A big shout out to anybody who can tell me why the hoof stinks when they put a hot shoe on it and all that smoke comes billowing off, because that is all about nutrition in the hoof. So dentistry, it's out of sight. You can't see the teeth. Who's going to go in there and actually look and see what's going on? So, yeah, I think it's an important part of providing preventive care. But on the flip side, if every veterinarian out there took care of horses' teeth and did the thousands of horses that are in their practice, they would pretty much run out of time to do anything else. It's been one of the major reasons why while I think it's an important part of veterinary practice, I don't believe you have to be a veterinarian to do that. I think that if the veterinarian is busy patching up and taking care of illnesses and getting horses prepared for the show circuit or the racing circuit or whatever it is, they don't have time to be running around filing down horses' teeth. And horses need regular routine dental care every 6 months is ideal, and they don't have the time. Now, we all know that the equine veterinarians as a general group are in a crisis right now, with only 1.4 graduates becoming equine vets and half of those quitting within 5 years. We are definitely decreasing in our numbers of equine veterinarians that are out there. And while the number of horses are also decreasing, the ratio of vets to horses is such that with the addition of travel from hospital to horse farm to horse farm to horse farm, and then back home to sleep and eat, there's just not enough time. So I really, really believe that non-veterinarians who are well-trained and are ethical and have integrity, they need to be incorporated into this. And we have no problems getting massage therapists or, there's so many, what they call integrated veterinarians, integrated medicine, complementary medicine. There's so many people out there who are non-veterinarians practicing. I see laser treatment being used. I just see a lot of stuff out there that are not being done by veterinarians. I believe that there should be an opening for non-veterinarians. And if you're a veterinarian listening to this and this ruffles your feathers, I'd be happy to have a debate on this using just numbers. Just how many veterinarians are in your state or in your county or your, whatever you call it, local area. How many veterinarians and how many horses are there? And how much time do you have if you applied dentistry and you applied 30 minutes to every horse to float them, and you have 1,000 horses in your practice? That's 30,000 minutes. That's 15,000 hours or something. My math is way off here, but just look at the numbers and try and tell me where you're going to find the time to apply dentistry for every horse out there. And I'm just using 1,000 horses, and most practices have more than 1,000 horses in their practice. So I'm just saying, if you want to make dentistry a focus of your practice, great. I think it's wonderful. I think you should be open-minded to understand everything that's going on in the horse's mouth, not just what you've been told by the agenda-driven companies that want you to get all their equipment, or the newfound college of dentistry specializing in equine. They're very smart people. They're very good people. I have really nothing against those people, other than they've never invited me and said, gee, doc, you have 78,000 floats or more and been doing this for 40 years. We would love to hear your aspect. We'd love to hear what you really think, what your thoughts are. Well, just listen to this podcast. You're getting them. But if you're into dentistry and you're a veterinarian, you're listening to this, please don't turn me off. Just keep listening. One of the questions I have on here on the bottom says, why do I not use power equipment to float horses? And it's pretty simple. This is tooth enamel, and we have carbide steel. How much power do you need to remove those points? And so you don't need it. I mean, your muscles should be good enough, but you end up using muscles you never used before to keep the head steady. But you keep the head steady using horsemanship skills. And that doesn't resonate well with veterinarians. They're not horsemen. Most of them aren't. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of good horsemen that are also veterinarians. Just stop hollering at me right now. I'm just saying that most veterinarians have been taught to automatically sedate a horse, to do everything on them without using any communication skills or anything that makes working with horses fun. They're just numbers on a chart, and they're just going in there and just, making them sedated, not even worrying about their pain in the mouth. not worrying about what's in their mind, what they're scared of. And you just go ahead and keep power floating them down. And then to justify it, you turn around and say, well, if you're not sedating, you can't get a good oral exam of the mouth. If you're not sedating and you can't get the very back teeth, you can't get every point without sedation and a metal brace. Yet nobody's come and said, okay, let's just see what Dr. Tucker's doing. Let's see if it is possible. And I'm just saying that after 40 years, I would not be in business and in demand if I was cheating like that and not getting all the points. So some of the other questions here, are your horse's teeth floated well? You can't visualize it. I mean, there's a lot of people that I can look at their face and see their face and everything's fine. And if you're a gal or a guy who's got long hair, you got to tie it up behind your head in a ponytail or a braid. I can't see that ponytail or braid, but I can reach my hand around you while looking at you in the face, and I can feel, oh, you've got a braid. And you've got to tie it on with a scrunchie, or you've got a hair clip. There's so many things that my fingers can feel that my eyes just can't see. Now, that said, I have a horse that I've done for probably 20 years, maybe 18 years. And this horse has always been difficult. I mean, just flat out difficult. I had to give everything in the truck, including Valium, to this horse to start working on it. She had zero tolerance for pain, absolutely none, and was so scared of anybody working on her teeth. And over the years, I was able to wean her off the drugs, and she actually looked forward to me coming there and floating her teeth. And then she started to have problems with her fourth tooth back on both sides, on the upper sides, what we call the upper nines. And they started to fracture. And as they fractured, not only one piece came off, but sometimes 2 or 3 pieces came off. And the teeth were basically rotting out. And I would come in for a routine float and I say, oh, we got another fracture. And the owners would say, wow, we didn't even know. Or maybe we thought something's going on, but it really wasn't that overt. And I would go in and take the pieces out, and the horse is doing well. I think she's 21 years old now. And something happened with the owner, and they had to shift the horse off to another state, to a retirement place. And their equine dentist, I don't know if she's a vet or not, came in and saw this horrible 2 teeth that were basically broken apart, and they've always been tilted out into the cheek. And yet we've been managing this horse just fine, and the horse is eating fine, and is on the bit fine, and everything's fine. There's nothing wrong with this horse. And she freaks out and gets referred to a practitioner in Kentucky, who is probably the most prominent equine dentist in America, if not the world. And he did a marvelous job. I did have to talk the owner off the ledge, because she was so scared that this horse was going to be medicated in the wrong way, and the horse would have all sorts of problems. And I said, well, if I was going to have teeth taken out, this guy would be the one I'd choose. So kudos to you, Doc. I mean that. I just don't understand why you won't even converse with me at AAP conferences when I used to go. You would just turn your head and walk by me without reaching out and saying, hey, hello. But maybe I'm just as guilty, because I don't reach out to you either. We sit so far apart on the field of equine dentistry, where I believe that the horse is the most important. And I think that for you, the teeth and the human are the most important, and the horse is just an object that gets in your way. And I mean that. But anyway, he took stellar x-rays of this horse's mouth. I mean, absolutely the best x-rays I've seen of the horse, of the teeth and the skull. Absolutely stellar. And he also used an endoscope to actually photograph what was inside the horse's mouth, the oral cavity, which was just spectacular. I mean, I have no more words to say on how beautiful a job he did. And through continuous rate medications, he was able to titrate the exact amount of medication this horse needed, which is the only way you could do this horse. And he extracted these 2 upper fourth cheek teeth out, and then plugged them in with some wax to prevent anything from going up in the sinuses. And I hope the horse does well. It's only been a few days. Only time will tell whether this surgery that was done is going to be beneficial to the horse or not. Or I should say, no adverse reactions, which most veterinarians won't tell you that there's probably a 50% chance. Maybe in this guy's practice, it's less, but generally speaking, 50% or more of horses where teeth are extracted run into complications. So the bottom line is this horse now is missing 2 teeth and they're plugged, and that's fine. She's, early 20s, and she doesn't have that much longer to live, honestly speaking. But the x-rays showed that these teeth were becoming end stage, that they were pretty much a lot shorter than the rest of the remaining teeth, that they were going to fall out anyway. So I think that this whole procedure just advanced the end stage of these teeth by several years. But was the horse having any problems? That's yet to be actually determined. The woman is, I'm sure, will tell me in the future, but everything that she said up to that point made me think that there was nothing wrong with the horse other than somebody stuck their eyeballs in there and saw something that was truly not normal. And yet we've been working with this horse for, like I say, almost 20 years, 18 years, something like that. And we have everything under control. The horse is doing fine. And at some point, the teeth would come out. And I told the owners at some point, the teeth are going to have to come out, whether they come out by a dentist or they come out on their own. Time will tell. Well, time has come and they've been pulled out by a dentist, but I just don't know. And that's a problem with dentistry today. A lot of people go in, they see stuff and they say, oh my word, this isn't normal, and we have to do something. We see this with this new disease of the front teeth called equine odontoclastic tooth resorption hypercementosis. Yeah, it took me a month to memorize that, so don't worry. We all call it EOTRH, and it's affecting the incisors, and the incisors start to die and fall out. And the diseases of the incisor bones, the bones that the incisor teeth are in, not of the teeth. So the teeth are basically secondary fallout. And what I find interesting is you don't need any piece of equipment to diagnose this. You just lift the lips up and you see, ooh, these teeth are ugly looking. And you can see 187 pictures of it if you go into the topics tab called disease systems and diseases and go down to teeth oral cavity and go down to incisors EOTRH, and you're going to see 187 pictures of really bad cases. And I'm just laughing because I don't recall ever seeing any picture or description of EOTRH in my textbooks in 1980. Between 1980 and 84, it didn't exist. We started to see it in the 90s. I started to call it ugly teeth of old horses. Then all of a sudden, around 2000, we start to talk about diagnosing the disease. And certainly in the mid-2000s, 2005 or so, it became a reality, and everybody started talking about EOTRH in horses, and nobody can come up with a reason. Of course, if you go into the systems and diseases or type in the search bar EOTRH, you're going to see a blog that I wrote, what is the cause of EOTRH in horses? And I believe that it's an autoimmune disease, which is in agreement with Dr. Patty Dixon. In fact, it was his idea because I know that Equident, or shredded mushrooms, Equident, EQUIDENT, can actually stop further progression of inflammation in these horses, but so can removing grain, which I believe is the cause. I believe that the lectins, which are the proteins in the outer shells of seeds, such as wheat middlings, rice hulls, flax seeds, chia seeds, any seed, is causing this inflammation in some horses that don't have enough mucopolysaccharides in the front of their mouth. So they have leaky gut syndrome. That's what I believe. Anyway, If you're still with me, I don't blame you if you feel like you've got whiplash in this, because I've been bouncing all over. Um, I think I've covered most of this. The purpose of floating teeth is to remove all sharp edges inside the horse's mouth and create a comfortable environment for the tongue to be able to do its job. And a lot of people forget just how important the tongue is. It has, I think, five. I'm going to guess five different purposes. One is to orchestrate the movement of food from the front lips all the way back through the mouth and down into the swallowing part of the esophagus. That's the importance of the tongue. It helps orchestrate that movement. That's one of them. Two, it's to lubricate by distributing the saliva into that bolus. So the lubrication, so it's good and moist. So when it goes down the hatch, it's not going to get stuck. Third is in the distribution of saliva, it's distributing the immunoglobulins that are as part of the immune system specific to the mouth. If you don't understand this concept, you must just stop for a second and realize that what's inside the mouth is outside your body. When you put food in that mouth, it travels through a tube from your mouth to your anus, and it never gets inside the body unless the body wants it in through a very, very sophisticated process of bringing in proteins or amino acids, minerals, water, carbohydrates and fats. It will bring them in, but it excludes things like foreign bacteria, dirt, things like that. And one of the first things that you want to spread around the mouth is the saliva that has the immunoglobulins that kills some of these bacteria. It also has amylase, which starts breaking down sugar in the part of the digestive process. So the saliva is very important, and the tongue is necessary to move it around. I believe, well, let me hold on to that. Just hang on to that. It's just part of my belief is that distributing the saliva is important. Also, cleaning the mouth. If you don't clean the mouth, you start to get the stale smell, what I call the old man smell in some of these horses. You know, the old man who doesn't clean his mouth out, and you get close to him and you're like, whew, man, clean your mouth, man. Same with a horse. They can have that. And if they're not moving the tongue, they can't get the food out of there, and starts to pack in there and starts to ferment and starts to get this smell. And then the fifth most important thing, and I really think that it's one of the most, they're all equally actually important, but this is the one that most people don't think about. The tongue exercises the teeth. What I mean by that is if the tooth is left in the socket without any pressure on it, either it can't bite it because it hurts, or the tongue doesn't touch it because it hurts, the tooth isn't going to be stimulated to get a stronger attachment in the socket, nor is the gum line going to remain solid. And this is where you start to get loose teeth and you start to get gum disease. And every horse that I've had with either periodontal disease, which is an infection around the gum line, or they're older and I start to float their teeth and they sound like rocks inside of a bag. They're just rattling around. If I take off the sharp edges and come back in 30 days, literally 30 days, certainly 60 days, those teeth are now solid in their socket. There are attachments there. The periodontal disease has gone with no other treatment other than allowing the tongue to get in there, clean things up, and stimulate the strength of these surfaces of the gum line and of the tooth attachment. It's spectacular. In other words, if I'm floating these teeth for the first time and I've got my hand in the mouth feeling the teeth and I rub the file over it, they're literally wiggling under my fingers. And I come back 30 to 60 days later, I do the same thing. They're solidly attached. It's crazy. Till you see it, you won't believe it. But the distribution of saliva is important to get the immunoglobulins or the defense mechanisms of the immune system scattered throughout the mouth. But there's also one other thing that's going on. There are bacteria inside your mouth. We're all hearing about the gut microbiome. And what's fascinating is there's about 1,200 different bacteria that are living in the human mouth, and I believe in the horse's mouth. I'm not actually clear of that number. It's somewhere between 700 and 1,200 bacteria in the mouth. I know Texas A&M did the study years ago where they were able to flush out the mouth, run it through their computer programs, and identify all the different bacteria in there. What's fascinating to me, absolutely fascinating, are two things. One, in that study, they did not look at the food that the horse is eating. And I would love to do this microbiome study in horses that are only on a forage diet versus horses that are on a grain diet. Because my belief is that a lot of these horses get dental caries, which are cavities in the cheek teeth, and it causes the fracturing, the splitting off of pieces of tooth, is secondary to eating grain and having a high sugar diet, or 24/7 having hay with high sugar in it. I really believe that, because how did horses survive this long without having cavities? In fact, if I go back to my textbooks again, there's nothing about cavities in horses' teeth. And all you have to do is open the mouth and look in, either with a mirror or with a pen light, and you can see fractured teeth. And there's nothing about fractured teeth in the 1980s. It just wasn't there. It's not in the textbooks. So again, this is another new disease like EOTRH. So I believe it's grain related. But we also have to look at what Texas A&M said, was that giving one dose of fibrocoxib, which is an anti-inflammatory, one dose caused a wipeout of several families of bacteria in the mouth. So we're popping in all these anti-inflammatories in the horse, and we're giving them a sugar diet, and we're wondering why the teeth are falling apart. I think it's pretty obvious. We need to look at this. If you're a scientist out there, if you're a veterinarian researcher who's listening to this, please develop some sort of study where we look at the horse's mouth, the microbiome, and see what affects it. Because I think it really affects the teeth. I think we can get to the root cause of EOTRH and of cheek tooth fractures. And why is it just the fourth cheek tooth? Not just. Why is it predominantly the fourth cheek teeth back, both upper and lower? Although I've had cheek teeth fractures in every tooth in the horse's mouth, every cheek tooth. Yet it's always the fourth one's back that seem to get it the most. Well, that's where the swale is. That's where the tongue is going over the tongue the most to clean the mouth out. And you get these low spots. And then I go in there and the teeth are sharp, and you wonder why the tongue is having difficulty moving. And maybe it's not cleaning these teeth out the best it can. Maybe the horse is on some sort of anti-inflammatory, some sort of antibiotic. We don't know. All of these affect the microbiome of the horse. And that includes the mouth. We have to remember the gut starts at your lips, not at your stomach. Okay, I think I pretty much used up an hour of my time celebrating my 40th year with horses, over 78,000 horses that I've either floated or helped someone learn how to float or stuck my hand in for whatever reason. Yes, I've counted them since 1998 when I've been doing it full time. I guess from 1993 to 1997, I kind of took a wild guess. So even if you want to knock off 10,000 for the wild guesses, 68,000 floats is still pretty good track record. And yes, I don't do scientific studies. I don't collect data. I just collect experiences. And my experiences have given you everything that you've heard in this podcast today. And I'd love for you to share it with anybody out there who does dentistry. I have a lot of people who think that I shouldn't be doing dentistry because I don't use a light source. I don't use a metal speculum. I don't automatically drug horses. In fact, I statistically medicate 3% of all horses I see, basically using painkillers and on occasion and more commonly now, dissociative, but benzodiazepine, which is just an amazing drug in horses. It takes away all their worry, doubts, and fears, if only for 10 minutes. Just amazing. But other than that, yeah, I go out and float teeth. I did 15 horses yesterday, and I've got tons lined up for next week, and I'm 70 and I'm still going out there strong. So, you know, my track record's there, and anybody wants to discuss things, not challenge, not abuse me, but anybody wants to talk about this in some way, I'm pretty transparent. Everything I've said on this podcast, I've written down. You've been able to see it, hear it, you know, and I've got 40 years doing it. and I've got more years. And I would love to join the discussions of our professionals to say, look, this is what we're trying to do, and help guide these young veterinarians into what is really important. If you want to use a speculum, automatically drug a horse, I don't think it's in the best interest of the horse, but if that's the way you got to do it, you got to take care of the teeth. If you go in, you got to address every point. That's it. It's that simple. All right. Thanks for being a member of the Horse Advocate. If you've already joined, I appreciate that, and helping others help horses thrive in the human world. If you haven't thought about it, please do. I think this movement is going to become more and more popular over the next several years as I put some more efforts into it and get the word out that it's important that horses get some advocates on their side, so they're just not automatically used and abused. And I don't mean abuse as in beating them. I mean, we all know we aren't supposed to do that. I'm just talking about making sure that they thrive in a human world. That's the best way I can put it. Not just survive, but thrive. All right. Well, that's Doc T. I'm all done here. I appreciate your time, and maybe I'll have another chapter read for you next time. Thanks. See you later.
Hey everyone, Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There's two reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.